All right. So as Taylor mentioned, my name is Arthur Moses. Again, I'm a soil conservationist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service with the USDA. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit today about soil health. And so before I begin, so there's a few things that I'll touch on that I noticed have been mentioned in some of the other presentations. Perhaps that's one of the drawbacks of going last, but at least you know that we all agree on the information. So I'll try and end this on a high note. There you go. So what's in the name? Soil quality versus soil health. You've probably heard of both of these terms before. So soil quality is the ability of soil to perform functions that are essential to people and the environment. One way to think about it is to ask how well is soil functioning as well soil, right? So is it fulfilling its role in the ecosystem? And since soil quality is about needs, and it's not limited to agricultural definitions either. So it could be, for example, of concern for building sites, right? If you're looking to build somewhere. Soil health is more aligned with the soil's ability to provide. So for example, food and fiber in a sustainable way. So you can think of only living things as having health, right? So we are recognizing soil as having life. And indeed, there are millions of microscopic organisms living in even just a teaspoon of soil, as we heard earlier. And then as well, we can maybe make this subtle distinction between the terms. They are generally used interchangeable depending on where you are. So that's something to consider as well. So when we look at soil, right, soil presents us with this great paradox. So it's both humble and it's essential. And it's also strong, so it can support, the road here in this picture, for example, in buildings, but it's also incredibly fragile, as you can see as it's blown about as well in this picture. So when you're working with soil, those are just kind of some things to consider. It's kind of an all-encompassing thing for the foundation of kind of ag. And so when you consider the term healthy soils, perhaps you imagine a picture such as this one, plenty of diverse plant life, lots of shrubs and trees providing wildlife habitat. However, while the farmers here might appreciate an image such as this one, this field might not be quite as pretty to the general public. However, the soil is still healthy in this field, right? So here you have soil, water, and nutrient management plans working in tandem to keep the soil healthy and aid in its ability to support plant life and human needs. However, you might all agree when you look at this image, for example, this soil is not as healthy as it could be. So areas like this, have a number of potential issues, high erosion potential being one of the main ones. So when it comes to managing soil health, there are a few simple practices that you can implement to help with managing. And some of these you've heard about a little bit between today and yesterday, but cover crops, so keeping the soil covered, so typically using grains or grasses, which are grown seasonally to protect soils. And so using cover crops helps to restore soil health by giving it organic matter. It protects against soil erosion, groundwater leaching, and can potentially provide livestock feed and wildlife habitat, depending on your wants or your needs. So in addition, cover crops can also protect soil ecosystems from temperature extremes, something that we have a lot of here in Arizona, and improve future plant health. So another consideration is energizing your soil with diversity. So crop rotation is the process of changing the crops in a specific field, usually season to season. So growing more plants in rotation increases the success of most agricultural systems, and diversity above ground improves the diversity below ground, which provides an ideal habitat for the microorganisms that perform essential soil ecosystem functions, like helping make nutrients available to plants. Rotations also help break up insect and pathogen cycles, in addition to reducing amendment needs by adding nutrients back into the soil. So for crop rotations, one thing to consider is what are you interested in growing, on your operation, and what is that plant's role in the ecosystem? So are they heavy feeders, which use a lot of nutrients, or do they help provide nutrients back into the soil? So using these kind of different plants in tandem, you can then plan your crop rotations to complement one another to keep your soils healthy. And then you want to maximize your living roots, right? So like year round, having living roots in the soil are essential to provide the food and the habitat for the soil microorganisms. So these roots also create pores and channels in the soil. They provide oxygen, and they can help increase water infiltration capacity, which helps make cropland more resilient to weather extremes like droughts and floods. So what are some of the benefits of having healthier soils, right? So healthier soils absorb water more quickly, helping to control runoff and retaining water for plant use. Healthy soils help improve water quality by filtering out pollutants. The soils will help provide plants with the nutrients necessary to grow and support the foundation for forming those nutrients. The soils will improve farm productivity and provides ecosystem stability. And then healthy soils have a higher capacity to sequester carbon. And most importantly, the soils are better equipped to sustain plant and animal life, because that's what you're interested as an ag producer. So now I'm going to talk a bit about some detriments to soil health. Most of these are specific to the Southwest area, and just kind of a broad touching up. Many of these you've probably heard of already, but just to consider how some of these things are actually impacting the soils. So first off, wildfires. Fire not only removes vegetation, but uncontrolled, it can also cause the soil to become hydrophobic or crusted over. Instead of rainwater soaking into the soil, water is shed off, which can be a particular issue on steep mountain slopes, where soil, logs, and other debris can be carried into waterways. And those excess materials can overload water systems, causing rapid and destructive floods. And so, depending on the extent of the damage, it can take many years for an area to recover from a devastating wildfire. And you can see here a non-exhaustive list of fires that have plagued our state over the last year. So you can see it's quite a few, and these do claim quite a few acres out of the state and from the land. So next up are floods. So many floods are a direct result of excess runoff. As previously mentioned, they can be a result of wildfires. So you're faced with this domino effect as one event causes or influences another. So floods can remove valuable nutrients from the soil, change microbial ecosystems by killing off beneficial soil microbes, in addition to causing just actual soil erosion itself. And again, you can see some floods listed here, which in fact have impacted producers in the state this year. I think I hit it too many times. Okay. So another thing to consider is dust. Dust storms are fairly common in arid environments. The resulting dust can have a negative impact on air quality of the surrounding area. So on your agricultural production area, and as well as if you're in an urban environment, on your surrounding buildings and potentially homes nearby, as well as the crop fields themselves, right? This excess dust deposition. So keeping soil covered year round, kind of one of the things we mentioned earlier, can help reduce soil erosion by wind. And so that's something to consider, particularly when you're growing in arid environments like pretty much everyone here, if you're growing in Arizona. So another consideration for arid environments is salt. So the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations estimated that there's about 1 billion acres of land worldwide, which are salt affected. And about 14 million acres are lost each year to drainage and salinization problems. And so you can see here in this image from a field, it's actually out in Yuma, Arizona. So salt-affected soils are the result of high annual evaporation, low precipitation, and restricted drainage. So the resulting salinity impacts soil productivity, quality, behavior, which in turn impacts the plant's ability to grow, your intended crops or your intended land use. And so as far as detriments go, one of the final ones that I have for you are a specific type of affected soils, which are gypsum affected soils. So these soils display a surface layer structure that's dominantly massive or platy. And so that basically means that they lack structure. So if you're kind of pulling the soil up, you're not going to see them forming like any structure, or platy, which kind of means a rough rectangular structure. But for the most part, these don't really exhibit much structure in the soil. And so the gypsic layer in your soil can be strongly aggregated with the formation of hard crust, which can impede the downward movement of water and the extension of roots. And so that helps to promote erosion. And then also gypsum affected soils, they generally have low strength, and they have a tendency to form cavities and pipes and gullies. You can kind of see that here between the last image and this one here. You can kind of see like the little holes and where the soil is actually breaking apart. And this can also restrict gypsum affected soils can also restrict the uptake of other essential nutrients by plants. So that can be a concern for your operation. And so while I listed off quite a few detriments, I guess you can say, for growing in Southwest soils, Arizona is very fortunate to be one of the handful of study sites for the Dynamic Soil Property Survey. And so we have, I believe, Dr. Ball and Dr. Blankenship from the University of Arizona, who are gathering valuable information on soil properties that change with land use, management, and disturbance over human timescales, and providing valuable information for producers who are depending on soils. And I can, at the end of this, I can drop a link in the chat for some more information about this. And so now that we've considered some practices that you can kind of implement on urban farms to help with soil health, some of the things that you'll deal with that are negatively impacting your soil health. I kind of just want to talk a little bit about kind of urban agriculture when it comes to soil. So urbanization has resulted in stresses on soil health and by extension on crop production in urbanized areas. So for one, growing populations, which need more space and more food. So we're trying to increase production on less space. And this makes soil health particularly important to manage so you can successfully grow on a smaller acreage. So questions arise about land use. So as we're converting land use, should we continue building on prime farmlands? Urbanization can increase the cost of fossil fuels, which can impact certain farming practices depending on your needs. And this can lead to producers switching kind of how they operate. So switching to minimum till or no till even, and reducing passes over fields to save fuel. So climate change as well is something that can be influencing crop selection and production. So as you all know how warm it is here in the Arizona area, crops that are traditionally grown in this area might not be suited to the temperature and rainfall changes that we're seeing. And in fact, producers are, there's a number of things producers can do. People have mentioned earlier, for example, like hoop houses and high tunnels to help reduce the stress from the elements. But these are just other things that can kind of impact your operation in urban areas. And then, of course, one of the most pressing issues is water and the growing competition over water. So the Southwest is currently dealing with how to manage water, in an urban area when it comes to municipal use versus agricultural use versus industry, when all of these areas need water. So water is a part of the core foundation of soil health, and how it's allocated and used is particularly important in the Southwest. So again, towns, cities, farmers, ranchers, everyone, we're kind of all challenged with finding ways to conserve water and to use every drop more efficiently here in the Southwest. So flood irrigation has been a traditional practice in Arizona for many years, but pivots and drip irrigation are more efficient, saving water by only putting it where it's needed by the plant. And it's also becoming a fast growing practice and can be particularly effective on smaller scale operations. However, some things to consider is that it may have a larger upfront cost for installing that on an operation. And it can also require some changes in current farming methods if you were previously using flood irrigation and you're looking at making the switch. But small and urban farms are a part of the answer for the future of food production. And the federal government and many other entities see the value in the types of ag productions on small scale acreage and are investing in the future of them, right? Like that's why we're all here. And so, earlier this year, the USDA offered $4 million in grants to support the development of urban agriculture and innovative production products. And there are also, several very successful urban farms in the greater Phoenix area, and some, offer tours. Some might have attached cafes, for example, and serve food that they grow on site. So it's definitely a growing practice in Arizona. And then, of course, if you're interested in learning more about the soil specifically where you intend to grow, the Web Soil Survey is a great resource and has a sort of an interactive tool that allows you to define an area of interest and receive information about the soils there. So you can see here where this red box just appeared, you can actually define either a polygon, a rectangle, what have you. You can zoom in and find where you intend to grow. And then what it'll do is it'll actually return a little box. You can see here, I just kind of randomly selected a little empty plot of land by where our office is in the Phoenix area. And so you can see here, on the left-hand side, it actually defines the different soils, the percentage of those soils that make up in the area of interest. And it can give you a lot of information, as you go through these tabs. There's a Soil Data Explorer. You can find a ton of great information on the Web Soil Surveys website, and going through and using this tool if you're interested in your specific soil. So it can really help you out. And then, of course, USDA and more specifically the Natural Resource Conservation Service has a number of voluntary agricultural conservation programs where we work with producers, many of which come with financial assistance. And of course, the USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender. And then I can take any questions. And if I don't happen to get to your question, or you think of something after the fact, feel free to shoot me an email. It's just my name at usda.gov. And yeah, and then I can perhaps get back to you later on. So that's it from me.